We're all set. Great. Okay, welcome to the December 18th meeting of the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices. We'll start right with agenda item 1, ratification of minutes of the October 30th and November 4th meetings. I'll move that we ratify the October 30th minutes.
Second.
Since we're all here, or we can do it by a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, October 30th minutes are ratified. I move that we ratify the November 4th, 2024 minutes.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, take a vote. All in favor of ratifying the November 4th minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, that's ratified. We'll move on to agenda item 2, a request for penalty waiver from Representative Cyrway. You want to take the witness stand here? Welcome. And the way we usually do this is I'll have Mr. Wayne give us kind of a brief background, and then we'll ask you for your statement, and then we'll make a decision.
Okay.
Great. Mr. Wayne.
Great, thanks. Representative Cyrway was a candidate for state senate in this year's elections, and his campaign was required to file a 24-hour report on October 29th, and his treasurer filed it 1 day late on the 30th. So we sent the campaign a notification that the preliminary penalty amount is $43.98, and Senator Cyrway is here to ask for a waiver. And we got a request from his treasurer, Allan Rowe, who says that he probably, after entering the transaction, did not hit the submit button to finish the filing of the report. And he says he's been the treasurer for several years. This is the first time he's missed a deadline, so that he's asking for a waiver. And the commission staff is sympathetic. Happens from time to time. The commission absolutely has the discretion to waive the penalty in full. In our staff memo, we were expressing that we recommended against a waiver because the $43 preliminary penalty is already below what is somewhat sort of a standard range of outcomes. But it's absolutely in your discretion. I just wanted to add something about how our e-filing system works before the senator addresses the commission. After people filing the reports is a 2-step process. They enter the transactions and then they go to the file reports area and they file, they click submit or file to finish the job. And then there are confirmations that are available to the person who filed the report. So there's a little message that appears on screen saying, congratulations, you filed the report. There's also an email. There's on the dashboard. It no longer says that the report is due. So we hope that busy treasurers and candidates and past treasurers will all look for those messages after they think they've filed the report, but not everybody does, and that's sort of normal human practice. So
Great, thank you. Commissioners have any questions for Mr. Wayne? Yes, please.
I just have one. So the fine was reduced based on the accidental not pressing file.
It was
Is that
not,
why?
no, it was not reduced. This is the statutory fine is what we're.
Oh, well, what it says, it's the below the range.
yeah, so that was my language.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the $43.98 cent penalty that's before you now, that's the preliminary amount, and that's determined just objectively based on a formula in the statute.
Yes.
And so what I was saying is when waiver requests have come before the commission previously, there's sort of been a normal range. So for example, if the preliminary penalty were $1,000 against a candidate for routine filing, then oftentimes the commissioner would reduce it to something in the range of $300 or $350. That's so that's the normal. When I say there's a normal range, that means when these things have come to the commission seeking a waiver, there's sort of a range of what you've decided. And the preliminary amount today is sort of below that range. So for that reason, we were recommending against a reduction, but the commission often goes below that range for when people present a good cause.
Thank you.
And on this page, in there, in the packet, it lists previous, penalties.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Commissioner Hastings, did you?
No, I answered my own question.
Oh, all right.
Reading.
Yes, Commissioner.
Just as a follow-up, and I'm glad it came up, so thank you, Commissioner. Historically, what's the biggest variable that results in the different penalties? Do you think?
I think it's probably the number of days late, because sometimes a candidate or a pack isn't filed on time, but they don't realize that the report was due, especially for like a 24-hour report. It could be a couple of months before they realize the report was actually due in October, and then they file it in December, and then that really hikes up the penalty.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other factor is the volume of the financial activity that was reported late.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Representative, please.
Thank you. I'm Senator Scott Cyrway, and
Oh, I apologize.
I just got sworn in again as
Yep.
senator, so I was representative, so you were correct. So, good morning, Chair Snyder and committee. I just wanted to explain a little bit, why I felt that a waiver was appropriate. I understand, the late, because it was a day late. But the gentleman that's my treasurer, he's been a vice president of the Maine Cancer Association. His parents both died of cancer, so he got into that, and he did a lot of fundraising, whatever, and anyway, he still keeps involved. He's retired, but he keeps involved. He helps people. He goes down to Boston, taking people for liver transplants or bladder or whatever. So anyway, I think he's been busy on some of that, and I think not to make this an excuse, but he also, we did 20 years doing tobacco inspections together. With the Attorney General's office, had an A+ rating. He's very conscientious. I thought that he's been a great friend. So anyway, I just felt that he, for 10 years, done an excellent job. He said that he put it in for that correct date, and he had all the information in, and he didn't realize it. And, from what I was told, my understanding was that they sent a notice the next day and said, you've got to push this button, and so he did, and then got it in. And so it was kind of like an error, the computer error. So, I know I do that myself sometimes. I forget to push send, or even on Zoom, people will talk and you gotta have everybody on mute sometimes because it doesn't get through or whatever. So I just felt that this was probably one of the most minor type situations there is. So I felt that a penalty, I just felt that for the job he's done and everything, I didn't want to put a penalty on.
So, very good, thank you.
That's it.
Any questions from commissioners? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we do not reduce the fine, and I'm very sympathetic, I really am. And I know that it's kind of a technical violation at the last minute.
Yeah.
And I commend the work that he does, the volunteer work that he does. But we've taken kind of a hard line, and the hard line is the due date. And if it doesn't make it in complete by the due date and the midnight time limit, we really have to assess something, and this is very small.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I understand. This is the first time I've gone to one of these.
Yeah.
And I understand there's things you have to do, and
Right.
so it's not a big problem.
And I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor of not waiving the penalty, please say aye.
Right.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, thank you again,
Thank you for your time.
and thank you for coming in.
Yeah,
It's always helpful when somebody's here to
right.
to explain the backstory.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Nice to see you, Senator.
You bet.
Take care.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 3, it's a request for a penalty waiver from Leo Kenney.
I've asked him to move to main session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Kenney, is that you?
Oops, that is me. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
What we do with these matters is I'll have Mr. Wayne give us a little factual background on it, and then we'll turn to you for your participation, and then we'll make a decision.
It sounds fair.
Mr. Wayne.
Hey, Mr. Kenney was a first-time candidate for the state senate. He was participating in the Maine Election Act program, and he was required to file a scheduled report 11 days before the general on October 25th. And it was filed the next morning at I think it was 2:45 a.m. A little, almost 3 hours after the 2 or 3 hours after the midnight deadline. We sent him a notification that the preliminary penalty was $835.37.
God bless you.
And Mr. Kenney explains the circumstances. He was relying on someone who had some work responsibilities, who had come out of retirement recently after agreeing to be the treasurer, and couldn't file a report until the evening that was due. And I gather it just took time, and it was finally filed on 2:45 a.m. Just to reiterate, because I don't think my explanation to Commissioner Hearn came out of my mouth very clearly. Sometimes the preliminary penalties based on a statutory formula can be really large. It can be $700, $1,000, $2,000. And so we encourage the candidates, if it's because of a good faith routine reason, we suggest that they ask for a waiver. And oftentimes, since 2018, for these routine good faith errors, the penalty has been reduced for candidates into the range of somewhere around $300 to $350. That's sort of a baseline of what to expect. We'll recommend, but the decision is yours. And if people come forward and offer good reasons, you absolutely could go lower. And I don't think it causes any harm in terms of consistency for you to go lower. So in this case, we were recommending a reduction to $300, which is in that range.
Very good. Thank you. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne? Mr. Kenney.
Yes. Appreciate the opportunity to come before you and be here, and as well as that recommendation to reduce it down to $300. I do appreciate that. I wanted to just kind of share some, I guess, concerns or feedback and what kind of seems as inconsistencies as a first-time clean election candidate. I do first want to, and I don't know if this is the place or not, but I do want to say that I really, truly appreciate the incredible staff at the ethics group. They were phenomenal, because as a first-time candidate, you have no idea what you're doing. I had primarily Aaron Gordon, and when she was out, Julie Obey would draw the short straw and get me, but they were just so helpful, answering all the questions and really doing the hand holding when it was needed. So I want to report that back here somewhere, just to get it out there. They were phenomenal to work with. So
That's always really good to hear, and I appreciate it. We have just the best staff on the planet.
yeah, it was so great, because stuff comes, I'm like, oh, what the heck is this? Call them up. They're like, okay, just here's what we do. Yep, you got time? We'll do it right now. And they'd walk me through it. It was awesome. So much appreciated.
That's great.
I did one addition, or point of clarification, or I guess addition to the fact that, yeah, so if you've ever done this, finding a treasure is not an easy job. I mean, I think I don't know how far in, but it's a pain in the butt. And I understand why not having us do it, and I'd prefer to not do it. But I ended up finding my cousin, who was retired at the time, kind of unbeknownst to me, but during the course of this, he took a job as a CFO at a University of Hartford, and they were installing a new president. So that's what he was, Mr. Wayne was just referring to. They were installing a new president that weekend, board meetings and all this stuff. The one thing that wasn't included in there was he did actually try to file, got bumped off the internet for whatever reason, and did file at 2:45 in the morning, which when I saw that, I'm like I felt like that was kind of a heroic effort above and beyond, to be candid. I probably would have just gone to bed and done it the next day if it were me. So as he mentioned, it was 2 hours and 40. I got the notice. It was 2 hours and 45 minutes late. And again, it was for me, I think as of my November 24th as of my November 24th filing, I had maxed out what I had to spend. I had maxed out my contributions. So it was known at that point what I had to spend. So this is obviously just talking about what I did spend, and that was a lot, which is why the penalty came in at $837, which about knocked me out of my chair. But my hunch or my feeling is, or my hunch is, that these deadlines, I assume we're in with PACs and all of that stuff, and those they're probably more monitoring also, like, what are these PACs raising for funds as well as what they spend. Again, at this point, it was known a month and a half ago, what I had to spend. It was 2 hours and 45 minutes late. It does seem very unlikely to me that there was a person on this earth that would have been in there between 12 and 2:45 a.m. Trying to figure out what Leo Kenney is spending on Senate District 8 campaign. I guess the other kind of inconsistency with this thing is, as a candidate, as I'm sure you're aware, I can spend $100 on this campaign total. Yet I can be fined $300. That to me seems a little inconsistent, if I'm being candid. So what I did, my calculation, what I thought would be maybe more fair, was looked at basically took 3 hours of the 20, within that 1 day filing. I busted that up by hour, per hour, what that would be. And I came out at 104.41 if you looked at the actual hourly rate on that first day. So again, about knocked me out of my chair. I just assumed, we're kind of dummies out here. We don't, I think for the most part, don't really know what we're doing. So when I saw that $800 fine, I about fell out of my chair, like I said. So it seems like it should, for it almost feels like, to me, clean elections candidates ought to be in a different, ought to be handled differently than PACs. And I think we're not, and that's just how it is, I guess. So that was my rationale, was breaking that down to the 3 hours late that was between 12 a.m. and 3:45 or 2:45, and that comes in at $104. So that's my case. I'm no attorney.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I will tell you that PACs have a different reporting scheme in the statute. So.
Oh, they do. Okay, I had noticed there were PACs in here on this letter.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Commissioners have questions for Mr. Kenney? Anybody have questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kenney. We really appreciate it. I'll move that we reduce the fine to $300. And I'll tell you, Mr. Kenney, I take the opposite approach to it than you do. I really think that if you're taking the people's money to run your campaign, you really have a heightened responsibility to follow the rules. So that kind of guides my thoughts in dealing with clean election issues generally. But I'll move to reduce the fine to $300. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah, please.
2 hours is not the shortest period we've had since I've been on the commission. I think we've beaten that by, we've been done maybe a half an hour. And this comes up over and over again, and because, and the primary cause seems to be because if you wait until the evening of the date of filing, the chances of screwing up, forgetting to hit the right button, increase tremendously. And as the chairman has said, we've taken a very hard line on the deadline. And it's 12 midnight and it's not 1 AM and it's not 2 AM, it's 12 midnight. And we have, I think, been consistent in my service on the commission in always imposing a penalty for anyone who has missed that deadline. And we certainly encourage people to try to get at it a little earlier, and hopefully if they've missed something, it will come to light before the deadline is passed.
Any other comments?
This has come up before. It'll come up again. There's some merit in what you said, Mr. Kenney. I think I'm agreeing with other sentiments of the chair and Commissioner Hastings. But my final comment to you is I'm not under the impression that we're looking on a screen at a dummy candidate by any stretch. So good luck with your political career.
Well, I'm smarter now than I was 9 months ago, but I was definitely a rookie.
Baptism by
Appreciate that.
fire.
What's that?
Baptism by fire.
Yeah, it is. I
Any other
appreciate you.
Comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we reduce the fine to $300. If you agree, please say aye.
Aye.
If you disagree, please say no. Okay, the fine will be reduced to $300. Thank you, Mr. Kenney, for coming.
Thank you. Can I just two logistic questions, which may or may not be for you? I also have some few hundreds left in my account, and like, how does this transaction happen? Well, ethics will contact me, I assume.
Mr. Wayne?
We encourage him to call our office later today and we can talk him through it. The money is actually due right around now. So it's unspent funds. So if he could call us, that'd be great.
If you could call the office anytime this afternoon, they'll walk you through it.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
You bet.
Happy holidays.
Hey, you too.
You too.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, request for penalty waiver from Kevin Freeman. And Ms. Mountain is joining us. Is that you, Ms. Mountain?
Yes.
Terrific. We're dealing with your matter right now, and the way we usually do this is I'll have Mr. Wayne, the executive director, give us a brief factual background, and then we'll hear from you, and then we'll make a decision. Mr. Wayne.
Sure. Kevin Freeman was a candidate for state senate. He was running in the Maine election ad program. He had to file a regular report on October 25th, and the report was filed 1 day late. We notified Mr. Freeman that the preliminary penalty amount based on the formula in the statute was $184.43. And Ms. Mountain submitted a request for a waiver on behalf of the campaign. And she can tell you more, but she explains she was watching her 2-year-old granddaughter and she entered the transactions, and my notes say that she forgot to hit the submit button. And as I mentioned earlier, when people do complete the process of filing the report, there are certain confirmations that they received that it was done. So, the commission staff is very sympathetic, especially with the actual cause of how this happened. But as Commissioner Hastings mentioned, the commission has a history of not granting a full waiver, even for these good faith routine late filings, and because historically the commission has wanted to reinforce that the reports really need to be on time and the process of filing the report has to be completed. We're recommending no reduction in this.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from commissioners for Mr. Wayne? Okay, Ms. Mountain.
Well, I just listened to Mr. Kenney and I'm not sure there's much point in me saying anything, except I have been thinking about this a lot since it happened. And I think we need to be encouraging more people to get involved in the political process and civic engagement. And the onerous fines, because I was only 5 hours late, like Mr. Kenney, he was only a few hours late, is not very encouraging. And I wish that I could get, I wish your penalty would be to ban me from ever being a treasurer again, because I truly, I've done it before several years ago and the last election cycle, and I've never been through anything like I've been through this cycle. And I hope I don't allow anyone to talk me into doing it again, because my absolute priority, but I want to change the world. I want to make the world a better place. But my absolute priority is my family. And that's what I took care of that day. And I hit file report and I went back downstairs to take care of my granddaughter. I did not, obviously, hit the second submit button. I know that there's a lot of financial corruption in the campaign process. I assure you, that is not what is going on with this. It doesn't sound like it was going on with Mr. Kenney's. And I see the true financial corruption that happens, people getting away with it. And ordinary citizens like myself and Mr. Freeman, who was a candidate, pay the price. I guess that's it for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am. And I'll tell you that nobody here thinks in their wildest imagination that you're responsible for any corruption or anything like that. I having been a candidate for office, I feel for treasurers because, they're kind of out of the limelight and they're just doing it from the goodness of their hearts and applying whatever financial skills they have. So I definitely feel for you, but I gotta say, for the statutes and the regulations to have any meaning, they have to be enforced. And, for years and years, the commission has required, if someone is filing a report late, they have assessed a penalty. So does anybody else have any questions or comments?
No.
I'll move that we do not reduce the penalty.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of not reducing the penalty, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay, she's gone. Okay. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, a complaint about communications opposing the Bar Harbor referendum. And is there anybody with this?
I have just, Ms. Chapel, and she'll be joining us in just a second. The other two did not join us.
Okay.
So the primary person is Mr. Scott, who's.
Oh, terrific. Indeed. Please have a seat.
There we go.
Hi. Welcome to the meeting on the commission meeting of December 18th. Could you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Carol Chappell, and this is
Hi.
Noreen Hunter sitting next to me.
I'm Noreen Hunter.
Terrific. And you, sir?
Peter Scott.
Great. Thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll have Mr. Wayne give us a little briefing about this matter, and then we'll have you guys address us, and then we'll move on to make a decision. Mr. Wayne.
Sure. So on November 5th, the town of Bar Harbor had a referendum on a local ordinance, and the effect of the ordinance would be to increase the number of passengers each day that could disembark from cruise ships. So there were a number of local residents who wanted to keep the current limit on passengers. And so they were opposed to the referendum. And they engaged in some communications to the public to urge a no vote. And we got a complaint from the people who were for the referendum, Ms. Christy Bond, who we tried to get in touch with her, but we could participate today, but she's not participating. She filed a complaint and she said, we don't see evidence of a proper legal disclaimer on these different communications indicating their status as a coordinated campaign under Maine ethics rules. So the staff did some preliminary investigation, primarily Martha Courier, figured out who was responsible for the communications. And what we found was that there was an informal group of 10 or 12 people. And Ms. Chappelle was sort of the leader of that group, and Peter Scott was also involved in that group. They met on Sundays and they received a couple of donations from a nonprofit, and they used it to pay for a mailing and some signs that were aqua colored. And one of their volunteers also paid for an internet expense. Then there was Ms. Hunter, who placed a half-page ad in a local newspaper, Noreen Hunter. And then there's a person who we couldn't identify by name, but who apparently purchased 15 signs at a cost of just over $300. Those were yellow signs and they were part of the complaint. So the staff looked at this financial activity and the different associations. And from our point of view, all of the communications that cost more than $500 did state who paid for them. Although in a couple cases, there was no address in the communication. And then from our point of view, although there is some ambiguity perhaps in how you apply the law, we don't think Ms. Chappelle and Mr. Scott's group raised or spent more than $5,000. So we don't think they were under an obligation to register and file financial reports. As is explained in the materials, they did do that because they wanted to shield themselves from any sort of local criticism. But I mean, my own analysis is that was unnecessary. I think our overall recommendation is not to take any further action.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Lane? Okay, who amongst you would like to lead off?
I guess I could.
Go ahead, Carol.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carol Chappell. The loosely defined Chappell, Levesque, Yeagle, Scott group, or the Vote No on Article 4 group, was a loosely organized group of people that met Sunday afternoons to study the issue. The members of this loosely organized group were community professionals and retirees. Many of us live in town and are directly impacted by cruise ship passengers and the resulting pollution. We did not work with Charles Sidman within our little group. We studied the issues. We shared ideas and written drafts of articles for the local newspaper. Some of us designed, purchased, and planted 110 Aqua Vote No on Article 4 signs. Others worked to develop an easy-to-understand mailer, which explained the future consequences of the proposed contracts and new laws. And about 3 weeks before the election, 2 people volunteered to develop at no cost to the group or the developers a Vote No on 4 website and accompanying Facebook pages. The only expense for the website was to pay for a QR code to direct people to the website. With the signs planted, a mailer sent to every postal address in Bar Harbor, and a website with an accompanying Facebook pages, we breathed a sigh of relief. We felt we had covered the issues well. We had put forth what we planned to do, and we had not spent more than $5,000, so we did not feel we needed to form a ballot question committee. Ultimately, once the ethics inquiry was filed against our group, we decided, in the interest of transparency, to register as a ballot question committee so we could show the greater community what our efforts cost and take responsibility for the lack of proper disclaimers on the signs and the mailer. With the signs based on back practices, we thought an email address was a sufficient address on the signs. And the lack of the address on the mailer was honestly a detail that fell through the cracks of multiple people working on one project. You have our apologies. Independently from the Vote No on 4 group, Noreen Hunter, who is here with me, started to explore the idea of an ad for a local newspaper, The Islander, and I'll let her explain her efforts.
Thank you. Ms. Hunter?
Hi, I'm Noreen Hunter, also known as a concerned citizen. I live right in town and have been very aware of the cruise ship problems that have been going on for a couple of years. The town voted in 2022 to limit the number of cruise ship passengers allowed per day at 1,000. That effort was never followed through with, which was really aggravating. Then the town council, the cruise ships, and pier owners got together and developed their own idea of what they wanted the cruise ship industry to follow. And that was going to be 3,200 passengers a day. This was something that they initiated, which was totally opposite of what we, the citizens, had voted for in 2022. And many of us were outraged by it. There were letters to the editor, one of which I wrote, noting how the people who were behind the increased passenger allowance were putting forth incorrect information, very misleading information. That group put together, it's known as Apple, put together a one-page ad in the newspaper saying vote yes for a new referendum. And I looked at that and was really sort of shocking. The next week they put in another ad, full-page ad. And in that ad, some of the wording was exactly contrary to what was actually going to take place if their Chapter 50 was going to go through. And I was so incensed by that I called a couple of friends and I said, I am going to put an ad in the newspaper because this is outrageous. What they're saying is just absolutely wrong and contrary to what's actually going to happen with cruise ships. And so I went over to a friend who is, she's a good friend, has been very involved in politics and political issues and town issues. She always does her homework. She knows what she's talking about. She's a good editor. And we sat at her kitchen table and put together the wording for my ad. And at one point she said, let me call Carol. And because she has worked with a newspaper before, and she can tell you who you should talk to with the newspaper for your ad and how that goes. So I said, fine, okay. So she introduced me to Carol over the phone, and I told Carol that this is what I wanted to do. And she said, that's wonderful. It's really wonderful that you want to stand up for that and do that. And I said, yes, that's what I want to do. And she gave me the name of who I should talk to at the newspaper and how that process would work. And then my friend thanked her. And then my friend said, I'm going to call Peter Scott, who is a lawyer, and he might have some input on some of the language that we put together, because I wanted to make sure that if I was going to put something in the newspaper, I wanted it to be acceptable and correct. I mean, I have never done anything like this before. I've written letters to the newspaper, but I've never put an ad in the newspaper before. And so she called Peter, and through that phone call, I met Peter and I asked him for his email address and mentioned to him that when I got the ad together, would he mind that I send it to him to look over? And he said, sure, that's fine. And so that's what I did. And he read over the ad and he got back to me with his wording for one of the paragraphs that my friend and I had put together was more succinct, and it said what I wanted to say with a lot more words, but it was what I eventually accepted, said that's great, thank you very much. And that's what I submitted to the newspaper. I paid for it on my own. I did not know anything about any other group that was doing anything. I mean, I did obtain one of the yard signs from a friend, which I had in my yard, but I had no idea that anybody else, that's where I stand. That's what I did, and I'm very proud of it.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Scott, do you have anything to add?
I think they did a great job.
I agree.
And I just want to make the point that we wanted to come forward. We took a look at all the expenditures, including Noreen's newspaper ad, and said, you know what, is just over 5,000 if that is part of an overall group. Don't think it is, but working with Martha, working with Jonathan, we kind of worked our way through it. We felt that immediately responding, immediately filing was the best approach, just to be completely transparent and, you know, just basically putting our case forward with an abundance of caution. You know, we didn't really have any prior experience with, you know, the Maine ethics laws, but said, you know what? Obviously, there's been a complaint. Bar Harbor is a politically charged environment right now, and we'd like to see it all get, you know, put back together. And this is part of it. You know, we don't want to duck the issue. We wanted to face it head on.
Terrific, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Chapel, Ms. Hunter, or Mr. Scott? Thank you very much for appearing. Thank you for explaining what was going on. I'll move that we take no further action on the complaint. Is there a second? Is there discussion? Okay, all in favor of taking no further action on the complaint, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. Terrific. We'll take no further action on the complaint. I think you guys probably didn't need to file, but I'm glad you did, just in an abundance of caution. And I think it's probably helped you learn a little bit about the political process. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure working with your staff.
Aren't they wonderful? Staff are great.
Really
Yeah, they really are. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, it's a request for a penalty waiver from the Bright Maine Future PAC. And there's nobody? Okay.
It's a bright Mainer. So,
And welcome, Mr. Tardy. Good morning. How are you? Great. Mr. Wayne.
During the last 13 days before an election, PACs are required to file a 24-hour report if they receive a single contribution of $5,000 or more, or if they make an expenditure of $1,000 or more. So on November 2nd of this year, Bright Future Maine PAC received a $10,000 contribution, so it was required to file a 24-hour report the next day on November 3rd. But it wasn't filed until 8 days later on November 11th. And we notified the PAC of a preliminary penalty of $2,800. And the PAC is requesting a waiver represented by Mr. Tardy. The treasurer explains in her letter that the PAC had committed to spending $24,000 to support 4 candidates. They were waiting for a wire transfer of the $10,000 to come in. It was taking longer than expected. So they cut a check for $14,000 while they waited for the remaining $10,000 to come in. They made a 24-hour report of the expenditure. And then just because of the extended nature of these transactions, the treasurer thought she was in the clear. It's my takeaway on this, is that no 24-hour report of the contribution was required. And that was the cause. So the commission staff looked at the situation, and since April of 2018, the commission has sort of presumptively assessed penalties of at least $750 against a PAC for late report. So staff was recommending a reduction to $1,000, which reflects that this PAC was late previously and received a waiver earlier this year relating to an independent expense report to do a good faith mistake, but we just thought in this case, maybe we should stay in that $750 range or a little bit more. So that's the basis for our recommendation.
And the treasurer scored it away as soon as she figured out that it was required, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Any questions for Mr. Wayne from commissioners? Mr. Tardy.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the commission. I agree with the staff recommendation and analysis. You indicated on a prior case, the statutes need to be enforced. I do once again encourage there to be a debate and a discussion sometime and maybe an overhaul to avoid what I would argue in many cases is a redundant and just a bureaucratic morass of filing deadlines. And just thinking about, I appreciate that the director takes a position and is recognizing the legislative intent that the public has a right to know and there's a public interest. But I don't know if any of us are looking on our phones at 12:01 in AM to see exactly what's been filed. And so in this particular
I
case.
don't know, when I was a candidate, I might have.
Yeah, well, but you also were worried about whether there were matching funds triggered. And that's an old archaic thing of the past.
Right.
And remember, this is a PAC contribution to a PAC.
Right.
And what was reported was the deployment of those resources into a campaign. Okay, but I do agree that you need to enforce it, and I do agree that it makes sense to follow precedent and an escalation to the $1,000, and there's no objection from the PAC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tardy. Are there any questions or comments from commissioners? Yes.
Just out of curiosity, because I think you thought about this more than just now. How would you envision such a conversation happening?
It seems to me that the commission could put together a group, a working group to take a look at an overhaul or make recommendations as to this, whether some of the filing requirements are redundant or unnecessary, and whether we should sort of modernize the reporting requirements. And so it could be a working group, it could be a recommendation to the legislature for the legislature to form a working group and report back. There's plenty of reports on the shelves that litter the halls of the State House. But this is one where, you'd have experienced campaign folks, professionals. I think you'd see a willing group of those of us who do PAC representation and candidate representation that would be actually willing to roll up the sleeves and take a look.
Just as a follow-up, how about some of the folks like we heard from today who do not have that kind of experience, just to get their input?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not trying to exclude, but the two citizens treasurer, I appreciate the chair's position that when clean election money, I mean, there's a high standard for making sure that the taxpayers' money are used appropriately in accordance with statute. But the requirement for a third person to be the treasurer, I understand conceptually from a fiduciary analysis, but in actual reality, is it the candidate that should ultimately be responsible or should be the treasurer? And we, as a practical matter, there are treasurers who file and that we've heard from and that are very engaged, and there are those, and I've sometimes served as treasurer in name only, their ceremonial role. And so it's sort of a tough. Remember, it's still we still refer to it as a citizens legislature, and to penalize, the farmer who's running against the banker or the teacher who's running against the daycare provider because they didn't hit the submit. And I appreciate that you don't, the deadlines are there for a reason, but something that's part of a implementation issue from a campaign treasurer is penal.
The last comment I'll make just personally is there's a translation that happens, I think, historically from some kind of accumulation of actual events and correspondences and findings that are modified over time by very thoughtful people into a system trying to make consistency out of all of those variables. And I think it's almost a natural occurring force that some of this gets redundant or some of this gets, I don't want to diminish it at the level of detail, but as you know, it's all motivated by consistency and defensibility. And we don't want to put staff in positions of subjective calls. This needs to be, I mean, any more than they already are. And then, as a number of people have said, they do a hell of a job individually in terms of guidance and support.
Right.
So my only hesitancy is to not unintentionally encourage, from my vote, something to unintentionally undo a lot of investment that has been made to stay current and to be consistent. So I'm just asking for your opinion. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure
agree
what
with
we
that.
should
I
do.
agree with that perspective, Commissioner, and I can tell you this, for attorneys that come in front of the Ethics Commission, I think consistency is highly important because that informs how we advise our clients. Much of what we do before we get here is from a client standpoint, and then once we get here, it's from an apology standpoint. And a legal standpoint. But that said, the staff has done a nice job. For example, I think it's important when preparing, the staff has put together sort of the data of the past fines for similar conduct, and that's very important. Frankly, it's necessary. So to your point, I agree that consistency is key.
Please go ahead.
I just have one, ruminating on your idea to put together a stakeholder group. And I think that that's a good idea. And I do think in the legislature should be the place for it because of transparency but the public involvement, because this is all to how you get the public in the room, I think is a challenge, but I think it's really important. And that probably doesn't need to be said, but I just wanted to raise it.
I agree, and to that point, look, I have an opinion on whether a 24-hour report is really vital to the public interest. But I believe that there are opinions that are contrary to mine, and I think that's important. And maybe it's not a 24-hour report, but maybe it's a 72-hour. I don't know, but it should be revisited. And there are a lot of reports that are due on an accelerated basis, and it's a morass.
And I just have to say that I think finding that balance between transparency and how onerous it is, weighing somehow transparency against the onerous burden on the filer. There needs to be some jiggering there. I totally agree. As someone who's had to file these reports.
Right.
Agree. Your points are well taken. The system's complex and it's interconnected in so many different ways.
Yeah, I don't mind representing treasurers. I don't ever want to be one.
Right.
So.
That's an interesting, as a fine, you're banned from being a treasurer,
That's
as
it.
Shelley Mountain suggested.
Objection.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, I'll move that we reduce the fine to $1,000.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of reducing the fine to $1,000, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say no. Okay,
Happy holidays. everybody.
thank you, you too. Moving on to agenda item 7, it's a request for a penalty waiver from the Cumberland County Republican Committee. And is Mr. Hall?
I have a mystery guest.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, I've asked them to open up their camera, so they'll see.
Santa.
How it feels.
It's like Hollywood Squares or something. Yeah, that's what the screen could look like. All that. Yes, exactly.
I was hoping it was Mr. Hall.
Well, we'll find out.
I think he was traveling today, so there's some trouble getting him connected, maybe.
Driving with his
Airport
phone or
driving
something.
or-
We don't want to contribute to that. It's like the guy who called in for his OUI hearing,
Driving.
driving.
Oh,
yeah.
oh, goodness.
It was after revocation. or
Yes.
something.
That's-
Yeah, I could have had a couple of shots.
That's
Well, right?
pure irony.
Yeah.
Oh. The kids, they left.
He's gone?
Don't see him on anymore.
Well, geez, if he wanted to appear for the meeting, I think we probably should give him a chance to appear for the meeting, so I would move that we postpone consideration of this to the next meeting.
Good call.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
No problem.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. We'll postpone it till the next meeting. Agenda item 8 is a request for a penalty waiver from the FAM.
He's joining.
Oh, he is, okay. I'm doing motion.
Good morning.
I don't see you yet.
Okay, sorry, this technology is a little bit new to me on the cell phone, so I apologize.
You're not driving or anything, are you?
No. I actually thought I was all set, so now I'm okay.
Right.
Oh, look at that.
All right, perfect. So now,
And could you
I apologize.
introduce yourself, please?
yep, my name is Michael Hall. I'm the treasurer for the Cumberland County Republican Committee.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, we just voted to postpone this, but I would
Oh.
like to make sure the commissioners don't mind considering it now.
Not at all.
Having
Thank you.
voted on- I vote to continue.
Perfect.
Thank you very
All-
much.
All in favor of considering this now, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Terrific. Thank you for appearing, Mr. Hall. What we usually do in these matters is I'll have Mr. Wayne give us a little bit of factual background. And then we'll hear from you and then we'll make a decision.
Thank you.
Mr. Wayne.
So the Cumberland County Republican Committee spent about $3,800 on Facebook messages or ads. This was about October 18th, and it was required to file an independent expenditure report on October 20th, but filed the report 5 days late on October 25th. So staff notified the committee that this was a late filing and that the preliminary penalty was $382.50. And Mr. Hall is here on behalf of the committee to ask for a waiver. And in his letter, he explains that he's not a professional. The committee relies on volunteers. And that's his basis for asking for a reduction, I think, but he can speak further. I just wanted to add that the commission has a history of being generous in reducing penalties for local party committees, which are either organized at the town level or at the county level. Oftentimes there's a lot of turnover in these officer positions. There's not always a lot of good education or, coaching involved. So a lot of people are not aware of the requirements. So oftentimes in the past, when these penalties have come up with the local party committees, the commission has reduced them down to $100. So that was our staff recommendation.
Terrific, thank you. Are there questions from commissioners? Mr. Hall.
Hello. So I appreciate everybody listening to my argument here. I am not a professional for this. I do it voluntarily only. I have done it in the past, but this was a much higher activity level, and I didn't know I was late. I thought I was doing the right thing, and then when I actually entered the information, it flashed a red bar that said I was late on this, and I immediately called the ethics staff, and they explained to me what was the issue, and it's truly totally my issue. I totally no I just didn't realize the deadline at that point. I was at the time filing the regular report, and that's how I picked up on it. I did have in my mind that if somebody made a contribution to us, that I needed to do the 24-hour. And in hindsight, that I think that the rules were clear, but of course, hindsight doesn't help right now. Totally my fault, my inexperience. I do the books. I mean, the work, 4 or 5 hours a month for the Cumberland County Republican Committee, and I just wasn't ready for the workload of this one. Apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. We really appreciate it. And go ahead.
I just wanted to say I have a social anxiety, so I'm a little bit stuttery here. So I apologize.
You're amongst friends, believe me.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
So thank you so much for appearing. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hall?
No, just to confirm, this was your first election cycle. Did I read that correctly?
My first for the Cumberland County Republican Committee, it was my second election cycle, I believe, but it was there was no activity on the previous year. This year, because of the presidential election, the activity increased so much that I wasn't prepared for it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Terrific. Well, thank you again, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
I'll move we reduce the penalty to $100.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of reducing the penalty to $100, please say aye.
Aye.
All
Thank
opposed, please say no. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate you being here. That helps to have folks here to kind of guide us through it.
Okay. Yeah, it won't happen again.
I believe you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 8. This is a request for a waiver of late filing from the FAM Political Action Committee. And there's nobody here to represent them. Okay, Mr. Wayne.
Sure. We did receive a message from the tax treasurer that she couldn't participate today, so she was just going to rely on her letter.
Okay, great.
So the FAM PAC spent some money in support of a number of candidates. The total that they spent was $1,522 in support of 4 candidates. And I gather that the report was due on October 13th. The independent expense report was due on October 13th, but it wasn't filed until 12 days later. And so we notified the PAC that the preliminary penalty amount was $365.40. PACs are required to file independent expense reports if they send out communications to voters, and the amount of the spent per candidate is more than 250. And so in support of the waiver request, the PAC treasurer explains that she had done an allocation of the total amount spent per candidate and thought she was below the $250 threshold for each candidate, and then no IU report filed, and then later re-examined the issue and she realized she had spent more than $250, and the report was overdue, so she filed the report. I might have misspoke. The total amount in the report is $1,522, and it's allocated to 4 candidates. Don't know. Depending on how our system works, there is a potential that there was a larger amount spent relating to other candidates, but in smaller increments for the other candidates. I'm just not sure of that fact. I just don't want to misstate anything.
Okay.
In any case, the preliminary penalty amount is $365. And since April of 2018, the commission has had a practice when a PAC files a report late for one of these routine good faith reasons of assessing a penalty of at least $750. And because this preliminary penalty amount is $365 and that's lower, staff recommends not reducing it.
Terrific, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Wayne?
I move that we do not lower the penalty.
I'll second that. Thank you. All right, is there discussion? Okay, all in favor of not reducing the penalty, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Perfect, thank you. And we have the memo about the case in which the supporter has paid for a mailing. It's an interesting issue. It kind of slides around inside some of the definitions and things. So I really appreciate the memo to give us some food for thought. Would you like to say anything about it?
Well, no, it was a good, I'm glad you asked me to do it. You know, it caused me to take another look at the statute and confer with John and Martha and others. And so I think, you know, in determining, you know, who made or financed the expenditure, I've sort of developed a habit of thought that the spender is the person whose bank account ultimately the money comes out of. But that's not really the only way to look at it. You could look at it in terms of, this is the ballot question committee's mailing. They made the contract, and they asked somebody else to sign for it, but that sort of making of the contract with a promise is an expenditure.
Right.
So it was a good way to refresh on this, on the statute.
Great.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Wayne?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, and I do really appreciate you taking a second look, Jonathan, and I love this line here, after further reflection, that you're able to, you know, to look at it in with a different lens. And what really got me was the greater informational value for the public.
Right.
And that I thought was good on you for looking at it like that. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
And I think if we're gonna err on one side or the other, if we can err towards more information available for the public, that's the way to do it. Any other questions for Mr. Wayne? No comments?
Just appreciation.
Your constant appreciation for Mr. Wayne.
We're overdoing it today.
That's all right, you'll have a future meeting about changing everything, I will pay you back big time.
Sure, I know we're thinking of an executive session, but there was one item of other business.
Please.
You know, after hearing the comments from Mr. Tardy, I was wondering if the commission wanted to suggest to the legislature by way of letter or some sort of stakeholder group, or do you want to just sort of sit back and monitor the issue and see?
I think we need to ruminate, maybe, my thought is
Okay.
we need to ruminate.
And I'd love to talk to the other commissioners about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think anything needs to happen immediately, but I think, you know, his points are well taken, that I don't think anybody's looked at the whole scheme probably in quite a while. You know, things have been layered on and changed, but I don't know that anybody has sat back and looked at the whole scheme.
Yes. And I think sometimes the intent might not have matched the actual, what's happening on the ground.
Yeah.
And looking at that, is this really the outcome we wanted? I think is really a valuable thing to do.
Worth looking into, I think, or worth ruminating about it. Anyway.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Should I schedule something for a future meeting, or should I just
Yes.
leave it up to your initiative?
Could you
or-
keep it
Okay,
on
put
the
it on the-
agenda?
Okay, all right, sounds good.
Yeah, for May.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
So we're talking about going into executive session and pursuant to Title I of the Maine Revised Statutes, Section 405, Paragraph 4. I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Title I, Section 4056E and Chapter 1, Section 5, Paragraph 2 of the Commission Rules to consult with the Commission's counsel concerning pending or contemplated litigation. Is there a second?
I second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of entering executive session to discuss pending litigation, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. All right, we're in executive session.
I don't think we can make votes. in
No.
executives.
Well,
Yeah, that's why I think that's why you can't vote on anything.
That's why I was thinking
Okay.
about having a public vote to come out of executive session.
Yeah, I don't.
Careful, yeah.
There we go.
All right, are we back? Terrific. Would anybody like to make a motion to send us home?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Terrific. Is there a second? Sure. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. We are so adjourned.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.